Good evening, everybody. So we'll now call to order the January 17th, 2019 Delta Protection Commission meeting. And Commissioner Clerk Ashley Medina, would you call the roll?
Chair Villegas.
Here.
Vice Chair Natoli.
Here.
Commissioner Burgess.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Cott.
Here.
Commissioner Bush.
Here.
Commissioner Slater.
Here.
Commissioner Flournoy.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Okay, quorum is established.
Thank you for that. So if Commissioner Thompson, would you please lead us in the please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, Mayor Cott, thank you very much for hosting this evening's meeting. I know we were a little worried last night with the weather. We weren't sure.
So are we.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, so I want to also announce beginning of the year. So our Governor Gavin Newsom appointed Wade Crowfoot as Resource Secretary and reappointed Karen Ross as a Food and Ag Secretary. So with those changes were for the 2019. So with public comments, I don't have any slips to speak. We do have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Anybody here that's interested in speaking to the commission on items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, then that takes us to item 4, which is the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if we could have the minutes reflect that I left the meeting because I was under an ex parte prohibition. Thank you.
So with that change, is there?
Yeah, that is reflected in the minutes currently, so.
Okay, I didn't see them as I read through mine.
Yeah, it's on the 4th page. It indicates you left the meeting at 6:55 before the, we can alter the wording to make it clear that you left the meeting before agenda item 11. So.
But why I left the meeting, I didn't see
Why?
to get up to
Oh,
meeting.
I'm sorry.
That's
I
my
understand.
point.
Yes.
All right.
Are you sure?
You like us.
That's right.
I love sitting here with my friends.
We'll make that change, and just to be clear, for everyone in the audience, Chair Thompson was under a restriction that he could not participate in any discussions on the Stewardship Council's consideration of a Cal WaterFix item. So we will change the minutes to reflect that more accurately. Thank you.
Okay, so with that change, are there any other comments regarding anything on the consent agenda?
I'll move you, Mr. Gardner.
All right, so we have a motion, are we a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a second by Commissioner Burgess. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And so that motion carries with that one change. So that gets to item 5 is the Executive Director's Report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. First off, we certainly appreciate being here in Rio Vista, and I do want to note that this year is the 125th anniversary of the city's incorporation. So congratulations to Rio Vista on 125 years of cityhood. And also wanted to introduce to commission members, everyone of course knows Jessica Tucker-Mole, who's our staff counsel from the Attorney General's office, and she's joined tonight by her colleague Carlos Mejia. And Carlos, we were really fortunate to be able to work with, along with Jessica, on the whole Cal WaterFix matter before the Delta Stewardship Council. And his participation was really essential to us formulating our comments. And I'm really pleased that Carlos will be doing some additional work with us in the future. Jessica actually just received a promotion and is going to start supervising attorneys in the Attorney General's office, but she also promises us that we'll continue to benefit from her wise counsel. So I did want to mention that. Just a few items on my report that I'd like to highlight for the commission. The first is regarding the update of our land use and resource management plan. And you'll hear a report from Advisory Committee Chair Mark Pruner here shortly. But DPAC, I should say, has agreed to help us convene meetings to receive public comment on the draft land use plan, which we anticipate releasing in the next several weeks. And we're looking to host those meetings in early to mid-February under the auspices of DPAC. Following those meetings, and we're looking to have 3 of them throughout the Delta region, we'll look to bring our version of the land use plan update at that time to the Commission subcommittee. The Commission subcommittee was appointed during 2018 with 4 members, 2 of whom are no longer on the commission. Commissioner Ferguson resigned as of November 1st, and Commissioner Susan Loftus, left the Stockton City Council as of Tuesday of this week. So the intention was to have a subcommittee with a representative from each of the 4 groups on the commission. And that means that we would greatly, I would welcome participation from a city rep and also from Reclamation District representative on the subcommittee. Our intention is to bring this to the subcommittee before the full commission, based on the preference of the commission, but we can certainly just short circuit the subcommittee and bring it directly to the commission once we're ready to do that. That could occur in March. A lot of it depends on what we get out of these public meetings that we anticipate holding in early to mid-February. Once we have a final commission draft, we intend, meaning a draft of the land use update that the commission's had a chance to put their stamp on and make suggested changes to, before we ask for final commission approval of that draft, we intend to submit the package to the Office of Administrative Law to initiate the rulemaking process, and upon a conclusion of the rulemaking process, where there may or may not be changes in the draft, we would then seek final approval from the commission. So, spent a little more time on this item than I normally do with items on my report, but I just wanted to make sure the commission understood what our next steps were over the next couple of months. We don't anticipate, we will not bring this to the commission for final approval in March, but we anticipate bringing a draft to the commission at that time for any comment, any further direction to us. At the last commission meeting, the commission approved delegation to your executive director to execute a contract for the Great Delta Trail Master Plan. And we are proceeding to contract with a Benicia-based consulting firm, Trail People, to assist with the preparation of the Great Delta Trail Master Plan. The total cost of that contract is $172,510, below the not-to-exceed amount that we had discussed with the commission. We anticipate the final master plan will be available for commission consideration by late 2020. We'll certainly check in with the commission as we proceed during that process. And as with any of our work, if there is interest from commission members in being part of a subcommittee or being kept particularly updated on our progress as we work through these items, we're happy to have that participation. Always welcome appointed commission subcommittees to help us work through some of the finer details. But if anyone is particularly interested in that in that plan, or in any plan for that matter, we would certainly welcome your active participation, or as much participation as you'd like to provide to it as we work our way through the process. Another item I wanted to highlight for you is that our Delta Community Action Planning, which we've talked to the Commission about on many occasions, those individual community planning efforts have consistently identified broadband as well as other communications as a challenge in our River Delta communities. And so we're working with Sacramento-based Valley Vision to assess existing broadband infrastructure and identify potential projects that can improve broadband coverage within interior Delta communities. Specifically, the ones where we've completed our community action planning, everywhere from Clarksburg and Hood, all the way down to Walnut Grove and Ileton. Our commission annual budget, the governor's annual budget, I should say, was released last week, and the commission has stable funding in that proposed 2019-2020 fiscal year budget. In addition, there is an augmentation of funding for preparation of a National Heritage Area Management Plan. And along those lines, Congressman Garamendi, along with original co-sponsors and fellow Delta delegation representatives McNerney, DeSaulnier, and Matsui, introduced HR 357 on January 9th. That's this session of Congress's version of the Delta National Heritage Area legislation. It's identical to the version that was introduced in the last Congress, and we anticipate that Senators Feinstein and Harris will follow up with their own version of that legislation introduced on the Senate side shortly. It was a quiet 2 months on the land use front. We only had one land use comment letter. I can answer questions if there are any about that. And then, of course, my report always concludes with upcoming Delta events. And with that, Mr. Chair, that is my report. I'm happy to answer any questions if commission members have any.
All right, thank you, Eric, for that. Are there any questions or comments of Eric's report? Are there any public comments on any parts of the report? I've had any slips to speak on the item. Seeing none, then item, so that takes care of your report, Eric. Mark is not here yet. Oh, he is here, I'm sorry. Can't see with my glasses or without. I'm sorry, Mark. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you. What a great venue. Your Delta Protection Advisory Committee met this last Monday, and we had a quorum. Not that that's a doubt, but I think it's an indication that we're firing and folks are participating, and I'm glad to say that we actually have a member of the public now that's faithfully coming to those meetings. So we want to build on that and get bigger access, broader access. And I'm thinking of Oscar's comments to us a few years ago to reach out and is the mic on? Yes, the mic's on. I think the mic's on. Yes, the lights
get
on.
the recording.
I just wanted to compliment Eric. One of the things that we asked him to do at our meetings was to put together a report of what staff is doing, and he's been diligent about doing that, which brings us up to speed and I think helps the commission, and he's done a very good job of informing us exactly what he's doing. We have a heavy workload coming up in the next couple of months. We're going to be conducting I think at least 3 meetings around the Delta to gather as much input as we can into the formulation of the land use resource management plan. We received an introduction of what's ahead for the economic sustainability plan, and we had, I think, about an hour conversation with a representative of the Stewardship Council looking at what is ahead for the updates coming into the Delta plan. And I want to thank the Commission again for the letter that you sent on to the Stewardship Council that forwarded our recommendation on recommending formally to the Stewardship Council that they include Delta as place enhancement and protection of the Delta within each of the chapters, not as a standalone feature as is now presented in sure that the staffer had heard that. She had, they knew it, they said they were discussing it. I'm sorry, the staffer consultant. And we really want to follow that through and give our input to make sure that the Delta as a place and its values are woven into the entire Delta plan throughout. Thank you, Eric, for mentioning Representative Garamendi's legislation. We intend to follow that and look at that. And I'm glad to announce that on January 28th, Monday, Rob on the Road, some of you may see Channel 6 Rob on the Road. He will have at 7:30, I believe it is, he'll have a segment in that program, one of 4 segments on the Delta. So if we can take a look at that, and the more information gets out, of course, the better. And I think we'll be working through Eric to ask each of the supervisors when there's meetings near or in your district on land use and resource management plan to get the word out as much as possible to get as much input as possible. I think it's only a great plan for sure. And that is my report. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mark. That's item 6, so item 7 is a consideration approval of the 2018 Commission Annual Report, and I believe Stacy's going to be providing that for us, is that right?
Actually, I'm going to be providing the report, but I do want to acknowledge Stacy Hayden because she is our collator and does a lot of the, certainly a lot of the editing, but also some of the authorship of the annual report. The annual report looks like this, and it was sent out to commission members with the meeting packet. This is our statutorily mandated.
I'm a little disappointed my picture didn't take the full page.
But it was a good one.
Holy cow.
And Diane? Yeah, you're there too.
Oh, I'm in here? Oh, this is excellent. No, I can see that, yeah.
So our annual report is something that's mandated in statute, and it's prepared for the governor and legislators. It's our attempt to gather for our activities for the year. If I could just hit on a couple of highlights for 2018 before I ask for Commission's approval of the report. Of course, if there are any changes that you've identified, this would be a great time to highlight those. But some of the highlights from 2018, of course, our primary, one of our primary responsibilities is to comment on local government land use projects. We had 17 such comment letters, including 2 to the Delta Stewardship Council in our role advising the council on Delta as an evolving place. And speaking of the council, we're actively involved with our sister Delta agencies, with the Stewardship Council, on the Delta Plan updates, and of course the CA WaterFix consistency, certification of consistency hearing process, which I'll talk about later, with the Delta's Conservancy, the Prop 1 proposal review, and the Central Delta Public Lands Strategy. 2018 was when the Commission concluded its work on the Delta Flood Risk Management Assessment District Feasibility Study, or what we simply refer to as the Levy Financing Feasibility Study, that was adopted by the Commission at the May 2018 meeting. We had numerous activities related to Delta Heritage, including completion of a community action plan in Hood, and the Delta Heritage Forum, which was held in July and was a great success, and we appreciate Blake Roberts' work on that effort. Our Commission outreach took a step ahead, a big step ahead in 2018. Of course, Delta Voice, which the most current edition is in front of Commission members, and I think there's probably some copies out on the table in front for members of the audience. This is our quarterly newsletter to just talk about great things that are happening in the Delta and the people behind it. But in addition, our social media efforts took a big step forward. We, of course, continued with our Delta Leadership Program, and then initiated some new efforts related to flood preparedness, including some high water mark signage. And there's a nice photo of that, including yours truly and Commissioner Burgess, included in the annual report. And then capacity is one of our strategic plan items that's highlighted. And in March of 2018, the commission became fully staffed for probably the first time I can remember, certainly the first time in my tenure with the commission. It's a strong, high-performing staff. I'm really proud of each and every one of them. And looking forward to 2019, we anticipate bringing the agricultural chapter update of the Economic Sustainability Plan to the Commission at the March meeting. Of course, I mentioned the Land Use and Resource Management Plan update. Both of those efforts are led by Melinda. They will be a big part of our 2019 work product. And the Delta Trail Eastern Blueprint is something we're preparing for completion shortly. And then, of course, the whole efforts related to the master plan that we talked about previously. Those are just some of the highlights of what we anticipate working on in 2019. And with that, Mr. Chair, and with, again, a note of thanks to Stacy Hayden, I request approval of the draft 2018 annual report.
All right, are there any?
Quick question, there's two different references in the report about the California WaterFix project and several thousand acres of land that would be converted from farmland to other uses. Is there any way to get a specific number? All the other references to converted farmland are pretty specific, rather than just referencing several thousand acres.
Yeah, thank you for catching that, Commissioner Flournoy. I had a last minute review of this. I did not have the exact number in front of me. I'm a little uncomfortable that we have an exact number. We certainly referenced a number in our comment letter to the council, and so let me just insert that number into the column there. I'll scramble furiously to find it in my folio, but there is a number that we relied upon in our comments to the Stewardship Council, and we can insert that number there.
Yeah, I just wanted to extend certainly compliments to those who put this together. I think it provides good information. It's very current. I think the use of graphics is helpful too. And, helps tell the ongoing story of efforts that work in the Delta, and gives, along with all the information that's important to report out to the legislature and others, I think gives an idea for anybody who's interested to, what some of the amenities are, and some of the highlights, but also maybe a good introduction. If people want to learn more, obviously you've got connectivity via some of the reference points that are outlined in the plan. My question is all of this on, or will be on the website?
Yes.
And so it'll be accessible. But anyway, again, just compliments, and certainly on Delta Voice as well. I think that certainly hard copies are great, but I think to be able to, again, it's what I think this commission has highlighted, and I know many of us talk about frequently. We talk about Delta as a place, but it's really a place where people live, where they work, where they come to play, to enjoy. And I think these stories, and certainly the work that goes on with planning efforts and tracking projects and such that we have a role in is important work, and I think this highlights that work. And so congratulations to our staff, and certainly all those who contributed, many who are in the audience, and certainly commission members who provide leadership. I think it's detailed in a few short pages, but really is a embodiment of a whole lot of work throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, and this edition of Delta Voice, this title on the first page is really carried throughout the entire edition. It's really all about the people.
Yes.
I mean, every one of these is about someone who's making a unique contribution to our region.
Right. Okay, very good. So any other comments on that item? Because you want a motion by the commission?
yeah, we would like a motion to adopt the annual report.
Okay, those figures I move it with the addition, noted,
All right, so we have a motion and a modification. So moved. All right, so we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so there's your motion. Thank you very much for that. That takes us to item 8, which is an update on the Rio Vista Estuarine Research Station. I know Eric was going to introduce some of the speakers.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, did we record a unanimous aye vote on that?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, there were no.
I don't think it takes a roll call vote, but just to be clear that all commissioners present voted aye. So-
I just didn't catch who motioned, I'm sorry.
All right.
Oh, I captured that, so, yeah.
The Baerwald Vista was a second.
Is it helpful? Okay, maybe I will state who does it.
Thank
you. That's all right.
When I'm not looking at you, you guys all kind of sound.
All sound the same.
I'll be
Wait,
great.
who was-
I can fully understand. Oh, sorry, Don.
And so, should I
Yes.
sit here or I'll go up there?
So just to clarify, there was no opposition to this thing.
Okay, thank you.
We ran out of chairs, I was told. You know his question, it comes from the west.
All right. All right, Eric, so you're introducing the speakers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're on to agenda item 8. This is an update on the Rio Vista Estuarine Research Station. Estuarine Research Station. Did I say that?
You got it.
I'll call it RVERS from now on.
That's what I did.
It's a very useful acronym. It's a pleasure to introduce Melinda Baerwald from the Department of Water Resources. Melinda's the project manager for RVERS, in which she will update you all on what exactly RVERS is. Ted Sommer, who I don't know if
He is ill.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that about Ted. Well, Ted is working closely with Melinda on this. Ted was the Brown-Nichols recipient from the Bay Delta Science Conference this year. He's done a lot of work in the Delta region. And I wanted this opportunity for the commission to hear firsthand about this project. I think the last time the commission was updated on this project was more than 5 years ago. A lot has happened since then. So Melinda will start out with an update on the RVERS project, what it is exactly, and then I'll welcome to the podium Jan Vick. Jan is not only a former mayor of the city of Rio Vista and a former Delta Protection Commission member, but she currently is the chair of the Rio Vista Army Base Steering Committee. And they've had a real integral role in this effort as well as working on the larger redevelopment of the former Army base property. And one of these speakers will tell you where that is, because it's practically a stone's throw from where we sit this evening. So with that, Melinda, I turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me to come and give an update on this. And we're delighted to be here because we truly believe that one of the major parts of this whole project is to start integrating with the Delta community. And we are big advocates for having science in the Delta, because it is already happening here and it should be happening here more and more. So with that, you can advance the slide, thank you. So to start talking about RVERS, or the Rio Vista Estuarine Research Station, I need to give you a little bit of background about the Interagency Ecological Program, or IEP, first. And that's because RVERS would serve as a home for IEP's scientific staff. The Interagency Ecological Program has been around for a long time, almost 5 decades now, and they do a lot of cooperative long-term ecosystem monitoring. It's made up of a consortium of 9 federal and state agencies, and really they work together in a very cooperative fashion in order to do long-term monitoring for things such as fish abundance, water quality, as well as abundance of things that fish eat, like plankton. So we do a lot of different types of monitoring, and the work is quite extensive. We have 28 long-term monitoring programs, but in addition to that, we do a ton of special studies as well to stay contemporary with whatever the current needs are for us to understand what is happening in the Bay Delta ecosystem. So you might wonder why. Why are you doing all this monitoring and all this work? And it's really twofold. One, it actually is the law for us to do it. It's a compliance. And so to be compliant with Endangered Species Act, both federal, state and federal, we do this monitoring to make sure that we are not endangering these species further, as well as the State Water Resources Control Board has water quality regulations. And so we are constantly checking to make sure that we are not increasing salinity, per se, into regions that we don't want that to happen. And so that is one of the reasons, but it's not the only reason. The other reason is because, as we all know, the Bay Delta is changing. It's changing rapidly, and we're trying to get an understanding of what has happened and what is going to happen. The only way that you can truly do that is through long-term monitoring. You don't have a metric for assessment of where things are going or how the condition unless you have a comparison. That comparison happens through the long-term monitoring. It is essential, and it is such a valuable resource from a scientific standpoint to have 5 decades of information that we can start synthesizing and trying to get those bigger pictures and putting the pieces of the puzzle together about how things are interconnected, because it's an extremely complex ecosystem with things from, you know, both anthropogenic, where people are impacting it, but also floods, droughts. There are so many different effects that are going on, and we want to work towards understanding that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so with that said, I mentioned 28 long-term monitoring programs. Right here on this slide, all that we're showing you are the sampling sites for 8 of those 28 long-term monitoring programs. You can see the amount of resources that go into this in terms of how much we go out on the water is extensive. There are people out there 5 days a week, all the time, going all over the system. Lots of people, lots of vessels that are in the system. You can see that it's pretty extensive where we go, and this is just 8 out of the 28 programs. But you can also see that those dots are really very much focused in the Delta region. So we do a lot of sampling in the Delta. And with that said, next, it actually should have been
Sorry.
Can you go back? Sorry.
Sure.
Maybe not. Okay, it's fine. Yeah, go ahead. So with that said, we do so much monitoring in the Delta, but here you can see that where we're actually located in terms of the agencies, we're not in the Delta. We're on the periphery, so that the red border is showing you the actual legal Delta, and where these different agencies, such as Department of Water Resources and U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and CDFW, we're right on the edge there in Sacramento, Lodi, Stockton. So even though we come here all the time, this isn't where we're located. It's not where the staff are. So they're driving in with their boats and coming and doing their monitoring, and then they're going back. This actually takes a ton of travel time. So the average IEP boat travel time is 1 to 1.5 hours per day. Usually we have crews of 3 to 4 people on each one of those boats. You can imagine the amount of resources that are being spent just traveling back and forth, when really where we want to be, could you advance, yeah, is centered here, where we do so much of our monitoring. And so what we propose is the idea of a centralized Delta field station. This will increase our efficiency because we will decrease our travel time, as well as increase our resource sharing. So right now with these agencies, they're in separate places. We're in leased buildings. The infrastructure of these leased buildings is not meeting our needs right now. It's old, and it was never designed for scientific purposes. And so to be able to have a new facility that will meet our needs will greatly assist our ability to conduct the work that we're doing. And the resource sharing can be done not just for infrastructure, from buildings, but also vessels, the boats that we're using, the scientific equipment that we're using. If we can share them, it makes it so that we can do our work more efficiently. On top of that, by having the different people all together from all these different agencies that are all doing research and monitoring of the ecosystem, it allows us to have that synergy of coming together and being able to talk to each other and be able to learn from each other and increase collaborative spirit which, our workloads are only getting greater as this time goes on. And so the more that we can increase our efficiency and increase our collaboration, the better we'll be able to do our jobs. But that is not the only reason why we are strong proponents of this. It's also because so much of our work is done in the Delta. I don't think it's right that we come in and then we leave. I believe that we should be integrating into the Delta community, that we are public agencies, and a large part of our public people that we should be dealing with are the people that see us going up and down the rivers day by day, and that is the Delta community. And so RVERS is truly, one of the intentions of it is to integrate with the Delta community and be a member of that community and help people understand the Delta community, what we're doing out there and why it's important for water quality and understanding species. And so we hope to not just come in for the purpose of having our boats here and it being more convenient, but truly starting to make those strong community connections. Next slide. So there's a lot of different terms that are used for the project. The overarching project is called the Delta Research Station, and that is a collaborative joining of two different projects. One is the Rio Vista Estuarine Research Station, which is the focus of my talk, and we abbreviate that RVERS. It's a nice acronym to have. And the second is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service project, which is a fish technology center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those two. For RVERS, it has office space, lab space, and meeting space, and it's really focused on the field research component, what I was speaking to as far as the interagency ecological program and doing all that field monitoring. And so this space will hold different agency people, and next, as well as we'll have warehouse and note storage, and a marina. And this marina will be able, I believe it has 23 boat slips, being able to have vessels up to 60 feet in length. And some of our monitoring research vessels are quite large. And so having this on the water access, easy going in and out, will greatly facilitate our abilities to do effective monitoring. Not only will that marina be used for the boats, but we're also planning on having part of the pier area be able to be actual research purposes. So conducting studies using the Sacramento as our study. Because right now, doing it in the lab gets you only so far. Doing it in a complex ecosystem can be quite informative, and we'll have the ability to do that. Speaking of, we actually are using the Rio Vista Army Base coming up this next week. We are we're going to be putting captive Delta smelt. So Delta smelt from the facility that is currently breeding them, and we're going to be putting them out into cages to find out how they do in the wild. It's the first time that captive Delta smelt have ever been allowed in the wild, and we're doing it at Rio Vista, and that is not by accident that we're doing it at Rio Vista, because we want this to be a long-term place where we conduct research studies coming into the future. And so we're very excited about that project. It'll commence next week. Okay, and then, oh, sorry, go back.
Okay.
Sorry. And then last for this, so as I mentioned, RVERS, truly it's the, the field and research side of, but it's all related to the actual ecosystem. Now, for the Fish Technology Center, which is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there's actually several fish technology centers throughout the country. Surprisingly, California does not have a fish technology center, and we really should, because what it's focused on is enhancing propagation techniques and research for threatened and endangered fish species. We have a lot of that going on in the Bay Delta ecosystem, and we need a fish technology center focused on improving our understanding. And so you can hopefully imagine what a wonderful opportunity it is to have in the same campus here, both the people that are working in the field, understanding the monitoring, doing the research on that, with the people in the laboratories and in the aquaculture setting, all together in the same environment. and the synergy that can be happening from that in terms of discussions and collaborative opportunities. It truly will help move science further faster, and we're very excited about that. Okay, thank you. Okay, and so this actually is too hard to read, I can see, but we just wanted to say that this project has multiple benefits. One is it has a lot of stakeholder support, both within the Delta community as well as with the state water contractors and the Water Resources Control Board. A lot of people support it. We also want to promote within this project public-private partnerships, as well as the ability for UC Davis to come and use the facilities and work with us on projects. So it's not just going to be an agency facility. There will be extensive flex space for other people to work with us on projects. The agencies, as I mentioned, the infrastructure needs to be updated. But there are other benefits as well, cost savings and travel efficiencies. And the ecosystem, most importantly. We just want to make sure that we are being very efficient and effective with our science. Next slide. Okay, so just a couple of quick facts for those that are interested in some of the details. So this is, sorry I don't have like a bigger shot of RVERS and where it's located, but it's extremely close to here on the decommissioned Army base in Rio Vista. And what would occur is that we would have 11 acres for RVERS and 5 for the Fish Technology Center. And the map, you can't see it so great, but basically the orange is for the Fish Technology Center and the purple components are for RVERS as well as the marina. And so you can see we have over 100, and this is just for RVERS, we have over 100,000 square feet of buildings. There would be up to 200 agency staff there. Do keep in mind that, you know, agency staff turns over, and so when we think about the Delta, we think about the ability of people from the Delta community being able to have opportunities here, job opportunities here. And additionally, the marina has their 23 slips. We have a master design plan up to 30% completion. The reason why it's not further along is because we have 50% of our funding is secured. The state has committed 50%, and we do not yet have the other 50%. And so that has been the roadblock for us for moving forward. But we are working very diligently and very hard at pushing as many angles as we can to get that remaining 50%, because we believe in the project. And so the project total cost is 90 to 100 million. That increases if we do a lease to purchase agreement, which the state is interested in. All right, so we have been making progress where we can, however, and so made some good progress with regulatory hurdles. We do have a finalized environmental impact report, environmental impact statement, as well as biological opinions without jeopardy determination from Fish and Wildlife Service and NIMS. So those are good things. We this past year got it listed as a Delta Plan covered action, so it is consistent with the Delta Plan. And the Fish Technology Center also got brought up to 30% design level in this past year. And so the two are moving in lockstep right now. As I mentioned though, funding for RVERS is at 50%. Right now the Fish Technology Center does not have funding appropriations yet. As we all know, the federal government it's challenging right now for appropriations. However, Delta Smelt is doing extremely poorly. And so therefore, although that is not good news, it could actually assist the Fish Technology Center in getting funding because the situation is dire at this moment. Okay, so additionally, the project is the proposed action in both the Delta Smelt Resiliency Strategy as well as the voluntary settlement agreements that were recently put out by DWR and CEFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so those are for water rights, voluntary settlement agreements, and it's in there, which is encouraging. The state very strongly supports this project. Next step is to secure that remaining 50% of funds. That's our biggest goal. But in the meantime, while we're fighting that, I don't want to just be waiting for that. Instead, as I mentioned, Delta community is a big deal for me, and I want that to happen. And so therefore, we are starting to move forward on some community outreach in the meantime, because that doesn't need that funding to come through before we can starting that integration with the Delta community. After we get that funding, we can move forward with a bid package, lease agreement, and construction. All told, once that happens, it will take about 5 years for the project to open. And additionally, because there are multiple agencies, both state and federal agencies, that will be housed at this facility, we'll be working on governance to make sure that we have understandings in place for sharing and all of that. Okay, so as I spoke last, I want to move forward on the outreach for the Delta community. And one way of doing so is through education. And so far, what I've been engaging on is the idea of starting with Rio Vista, with the middle school at Rio Vista. It is extremely close to the Army base. And so we have the opportunity starting to engage with those kids on what we're gonna be doing. And I love that idea, and the reason why is because I don't want this facility to be built and then we just say, we're here. Instead, I want it to be where they're like, they know that we're coming, they know what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it matters from a scientific standpoint. Start getting them engaged from the beginning. So not only is it for the kids, which I think would be great for them in terms of getting them excited about science, getting them thinking about agency careers, and that there could potentially be agency careers right here in Rio Vista. But on top of that, I think it's gonna be great for the scientists too. I think this is a win-win, because I know when I go out into classrooms and start talking about the work that I'm doing and see their excitement and exuberance, it is wonderful. Like, you feel really good about the work that you do when that happens. And so I think it could really help us with staff recruitment and retention too. That is not so much of a problem for us up in Sacramento. This is a very serious problem, recruitment and retention down in Lodi and Stockton. And so to get them going with the community, that would be excellent. So I'm really excited about it. Additionally, just the general idea is that if we can start interacting with the community and sharing why we're doing what we're doing, they'll have an understanding of why we're building this facility here and why we are moving into the Delta and trying to integrate. And so I don't think that should happen later. That should be happening now. And not only for the purposes of RVERS do I think it should be happening, but we're here and we've been doing stuff in the Delta for a long time. And for the community to have an understanding of why we're here, that's value. There's a reason. Yeah, thank you. So with that said, the Department of Water Resources, both my division, which is the Environmental Services Division, as well as the Public Affairs Office, have teamed up with the Solano County's Resource Conservation District. We have an excellent water education program already, where they go to different elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and they do very interactive work with them. And so they have, but the thing is that they do it for things such as Sassoon Marsh and a couple other programs. They don't have anything that they do for the Sacramento River. That's really where we're talking about here. And that's where I want the emphasis to be in terms of the education of what's going on, because that's in their backyard. And so they should have an understanding. And so therefore, that's what we're going to do. Right there, I'm showing an example. I actually have a handout if anybody's interested in one of these handouts of what they do with their middle schoolers. And I love this handout of what they do. I'm so excited that we're going to be able to do this for this area too. And so we have funding to do this, to develop the curriculum, and we're going to hopefully be bringing this one more, thank you. We're hopefully going to be bringing this into schools if they're welcoming to it in the 2019-2020 school year. And we're really excited about getting this going and start the process. And that is it.
Mr. Chair. Great presentation. I like the enthusiasm about the kids, because if we get the children involved, they get the parents involved.
Absolutely.
A couple of thoughts and comments. I just spent the last 2 years in Delta Stewardship Council, and on that agenda, there is a thing called By the Numbers. And they talk about rainfall and year-to-date and snowpack. But one of the things they used to talk about was Delta smelt. Well, the numbers got so bad, we don't talk about that. Now Chinook's salmon, I think it is, and our chair is gonna be representing us on that council. So it's just funny how, you know, what used to be an indicator has gotten so bad, we've moved on to another indicator.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
go right ahead.
I was going to say, this year, it just came out a couple weeks ago that, so we do different Delta smelt surveys. There's several throughout the year, monitoring every single life stage of Delta smelt. And this year, so for the subadults, which happens in the fall, it's called the Fall Midwater Trawl Index. It is an IEP monitoring, and for the first time in recorded history, the index for Delta smelt was 0. 0. It doesn't mean that we didn't catch any, but we caught so little that the index in terms of historical was at 0. That's never happened. We don't know what to do with that because these indexes are used to set take allotments. So how many species in the monitoring programs can you then take in the future, or can anybody take under the Endangered Species Act? With a 0, that would mean you can take nothing. And that can actually happen, right? Because things just happen by accident. And so it's not that we're not catching any Delta smelt, but it's getting there. It is getting to the point now where we truly believe that this may be an extinction in the next couple of years, which has not happened for a very, very long time under the Endangered Species Act. However, it won't actually be called an extinction because it'll be in the wild that the extinction would happen. That's why we are moving so aggressively right now on captive Delta smelt research, because we see that being the future. And as of right now, Fish and Wildlife Service is saying no to supplementation in the wild. They are very strongly reconsidering this right now because they have to. There is no other alternative. If they do not do anything else, the Delta smelt, it appears, are on a downward trend towards extinction.
And last thing is, several years ago, Congressman Garamendi held a meeting, if you will, and brought together the different stakeholders. And that was several years ago, and we haven't moved beyond that, I gather. Is Congressman Garamendi involved?
Yeah, good question. And he is involved. So we just did have another stakeholder meeting. Let's see, it was either November or no, maybe October. We had a stakeholder meeting with him where he brought us, the Department of Water Resources, as well as U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So U.S. Bureau of Reclamation is largely the federal entity that is by far the most likely for federal appropriations to come through for the project. And so he, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Fish Technology Center, he brought all the parties together and we had a talk, and not much has happened since. It's very difficult right now with what's happening on the federal side. For them, they seem to have lost focus of this right now because of all the other things that are going on. Garamendi is committed to assisting us where he can. I think his attention right now might not be focused on this. And so, he, as I said, he really does want this project to happen very much. But it's a question of where is it prioritized in terms of all of the many things that the Congress is dealing with right now. And it does not appear that it's at the top right now.
Ms. Chair, would it be possible for us to put together a letter and your signature to send to Congressman Garamendi's office, tell him that the importance of having this facility, and I'm not sure how we would word it, but I think we need to start bringing some attention to this because it's been here a long time and we know the positive effects it could have if we get that additional funding. So I'd like to at least consider that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Commissioner Thompson and Chair Villegas, my advice would be for me to prepare something, and we'll put it on the agenda for the next commission meeting. I don't think we're losing a lot of time in that, but just to make sure that we're wording it in the most appropriate way. It would be most powerful, of course, if it's something that the full commission votes on. I don't see that this is something that would generate a lot of controversy amongst the commission members. So if that's okay, Commissioner Thompson, we can certainly add it to the agenda for the next meeting and for commission action at that time.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you.
Well, and we certainly would appreciate any efforts that you can assist us on our behalf. We would be most grateful, and so I greatly appreciate that comment. In addition to Congressman Garamendi, I would say right now, the federal agencies, letting them know, such as the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the importance that you see behind this could be useful, because they have so far have been our hardest people to convince.
Yeah, we can think about who ought to be on that.
Yeah.
On that list that we reach out to. Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments on that suggestion?
Just one additional question, and I would first want to echo Commissioner Thompson's comments. Great presentation, very enthusiastic. I'm all fired up to visit the place when it gets built.
Yeah.
So I do think it's fantastic, because I'm not aware of any places, even in the country, that have that kind of a facility that's focusing on a system and bringing that collaborative effort together among that many partners. So it's fantastic. Going back to the monitoring data and all these long-term efforts, where's the easiest place for the public or the commissioners or anyone else to go to see what do all these studies say? What do they all mean, and where can we find that summary?
That's a great question. So the Interagency Ecological Program does, within the Department of Water Resources, we do have websites. So if you look up Interagency Ecological Program, you can get an idea. However, we are very much working on some new material to assist with more people understanding like what is happening in terms of these trends. And so we're doing what is going to be a seasonal report, which will be a status and trends report. And it'll be focused on particular species that we feel are pivotal for understanding what is happening at different points in the year. Of course, Delta smelt will be on there frequently, but there'll be other species too, because we are not a one species ecosystem. There are so many species, and we have to understand the interactions. And so this report will, in very easy terms, be able to show you visually what is happening and give you a couple bullets on what we think is important for you to note. So that is one. Additionally, we are revamping our website. Right now, we have a website committee that is working on that. RVERS will be part of that new website, but everything to do with the Interagency Ecological Program will be on that, and I would be happy to share that with this committee when we get that up and running. It should be probably late spring. As I mentioned, now you can go to Department of Water Resources for some information, but and I encourage you to do so. But this new website, I'm quite enthusiastic about it. I think it's more impressive than what we currently have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, yeah. I think there would be interest by the commission to, as a follow-up, when it is up and going, to let us know, to sort of let staff know. So
Absolutely, I would love to.
Provide a link, especially if it's easily digestible data. So
Yes.
Because in this era, we are in information overload, and folks don't have the capacity anymore to analyze data. It almost has to be kind of done down. So link if you want more information, but it's just there's so much coming at us these days. That
Yes,
to the
yes.
extent that it's simplified and kind of hits home in a way that I think folks would appreciate.
Absolutely. The Stats and Trends report is geared towards managers. They are not scientists. And so therefore, I do believe it will be quite digestible. Additionally, I'm on this website committee, and as part of it, I will also be including this educational outreach as one of our public engagement opportunities. Anything else?
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
And now, Mr. Chair and Commission members, I'd like to invite Jan Vick to the podium. Jan chairs the Rio Vista RVERS Steering Committee. And we're pleased she could be with us here this evening.
Thank you. I was looking back, and over 10 years ago when I became mayor, we had been working since about 95 or 98 with the state on developing a research station at the Army base. The Army base was established in 1911 when the Army purchased the land. It was at the time 33 acres. Now the Army base now is 28 acres because some of that is the Coast Guard station. Were a site of 10 different military missions over the years until the 1990s, including the Army Corps of Engineers. This is a base of operation for flood control and navigation activities for the entire Delta. So it was at periods of time a very, very busy place. So it was closed, and it was on the closure list of the first BRAC commission. And it was ultimately transferred, well, it was sold below market value to the city of Rio Vista. And in 2001, the consortium was looking for a place to a new Delta, for the new Delta Research Center. So this has been going on for 18 years now. And over a period of time, they had selected Rio Vista as the most appropriate and accessible site, mainly because we have this Army base. If you ever want to drive by it, if you know where Sandy Beach Regional Park is, or if you've ever been to the Point Restaurant, it's in between Sandy Beach and it's right next door to the Coast Guard station. It's not much to look at, but it has magnificent potential. Melinda had a small map. This is the map that she showed. I made a number of copies and they're out on the table outside. This is what we are going to be working with. When I became mayor, nothing was happening. We had kind of an ad hoc committee that was working with DWR on establishing the research center. And we decided that it needed much more than just this ad hoc. So as mayor, I and the city council created the steering committee. The steering committee was tasked with working with DWR to move this project along because it was absolutely going nowhere. And we've been in existence since that time, and I officially went on that steering committee when I ended my term as mayor. And so I have been chair for several years because the committee won't let me be not chair. I try every year. So I wanted to let you know a little bit of what we are trying to do. I have to say that we would not be where we are today if it had not been for Congressman Garamendi. Because I discovered that the Army base was in his district. This was before redistricting, and now the whole city is. And I had some contact with his staff, and I said, we really need to move this on. And I talked with his staff, and that was the first meeting that we held at the Coast Guard station. And his opening statement was, this is a project that nobody is against. Why isn't it going anywhere? And so, as Melinda so beautifully laid out, we have made major progress, and we're at kind of a stall right now. We will get through this. But I wanted to kind of bring you up what the city would like to do. We will have about 13 acres. I know you can't see it, but we will have the waterfront. And the waterfront is full of buildings that were used during the active parts. It is a potential historic district. This is potential, which doesn't mean that we have to save all the buildings. Most of the buildings are in terrible shape and will need to be taken down. But there's the waterfront. Up here is a green space, and it's up high, and would be a wonderful place for picnic areas, for people to go out to the point. It's right adjacent to the marina. We can't build on it because there's a very large natural gas pipeline, PG&E pipeline, that goes through there and under the river. So we can use it for parking lots, but that's all. But what we are talking about, and the committee now is embarking on a program to what do we want to do with what we have and the property. The main thing we have talked about for the last 10 years is to have an interpretive center. This interpretive center would not only highlight the history of the Army base, which is really very important to the history of the Delta, but also highlight what is being done research-wise, to work with DWR, to have a place where classes from schools can come and have programs. There's a big white building out there that is probably the best preserved of all of them. We'd have no idea if it's even feasible to try to find money to restore it. It's a beautiful building. It would make an ideal, this is my dream, and I think most of my committee shares this. Interpretive center. It's right on the edges as people would come in, and there's so many possibilities to have trails and picnic areas and interpretive signs all along saying what was done there with pictures. We have a lot of historical pictures. Our Vista Museum is full of historical pictures of the Army base when it was in full flight. So I think that that's what we are going to be working for. We have no funding for this. We have no income from the Army base at this point until RVERS is started and we lease the land to them. And so it will have to be public-private partnerships, grants, anything that we can get money together. So we are going to be putting together what we think could be our part in this project and present it to the city council, hopefully for their approval. And further that, it's an absolutely marvelous piece of property. Unfortunately, nobody's allowed on it because the buildings are very dangerous. There's been no money to do any maintenance out there for years. The buildings are all clad, of course, with asbestos siding, which is a problem. The Army did a very good job of cleanup overall, but there's still things around the building that are a danger. We do occasionally give guided tours, so if people are interested, we would be happy to arrange a tour for the commission. And I'm saying this, and Ron is, not saying anything, but we've done this before. We have had groups come out, and it's just done on an absolute as-needed basis. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to ask, but this is where we want to go. It's a really important project for the Delta and for the city.
Okay. Are there any questions? Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for continuing to keep the dream alive. Any public testimony or comments on that item? Yes, sir.
Would you like me to come up?
Please, if you will. Do we ask that they identify themselves? Is that helpful for the record?
Yes.
Thank you guys all for coming. Mr. Vink and Mr. Pruner. Last time I was talking to you guys, it was for one of the DPC meetings talking about picking up trash in the Delta. So happy to be here with you guys. I was actually just gonna come up here and complain about furlough and try to get it here. But actually, if it wasn't for the furlough, I wouldn't be here right now. Yeah, happy to be here with you guys. So my name's Chris Valley. I work for the USGS, currently furloughed. I'm a research vessel captain for the IEP. Great job up there. Appreciated it.
It's nice to see you in person.
Sure. Pleasure. I've been chasing Melinda down in email saying, hey, when you get that going, let me know because I want to be a part of it. Federal employee, Rio Vista resident. I actually live on Sherman Island. Been working out in the Delta for a long time. Feel very strongly about what we're trying to do here, and also not to sound, too petrified or anything about like the situation in the Delta. We all know it's pretty dire. I doubt I need to try to convince you guys of the importance of a place like this, because I'm sure we're all nodding our heads like, yeah, it's a great idea. But I do just want to say, as a Delta resident, as a person who's been conducting science out in the Delta for a long time, on boats, on the water, this is a fantastic idea that's really exciting, I think, for a lot of different reasons, scientifically, for the town of Rio Vista, for the Delta, and then what can be accomplished by it. And if it's a state-of-the-art facility on some of the most important water in the world, arguably that has global implications, seventh largest economy, it's a really big deal what we have going on here, and I just wanted to come out and voice my support happily about it, and then maybe I'll get to participate with it in the future. But I agreed with so many of the things that Melinda was saying. I think the public outreach is really important. I just see a lot of value in this project. So happy to see all the familiar faces, and thank you guys so much for taking my comment.
Thank you for coming out, Chris. Did you say you were with the USGS?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see the boats in the morning, every morning coming on a major corridor in West Sacramento to get gas. So they're driving, so they are spending probably an hour and a half every day. It seems like every day I see them gassing up and driving all the way out into the Delta at some point. So thank you for your service. And
Yeah.
sorry about the situation you're in. That's very unfortunate.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's been interesting. But I'm gonna blame my disheveled demeanor on the I didn't expect to be speaking, but thank you guys for taking.
We're just glad you're not in your pajamas or something.
I changed right before I got here in the car.
Thank you.
Chris is probably someone you see filling up at that gas station, and Chris did not say it, but when he was last before the commission, it was in May, he was part of the Delta Leadership Program in last year's class, so it's great to see him putting it into practice. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, so that wraps up item 8. Are there any comments or questions? Item 9, which is the scope of work for the Economic Sustainability Plan update for the Recreation and Tourism chapter. Please be behind me.
Great.
Good evening, Chairman Villegas and Commission members. I'm Virginia Gardner. I'm your most recently brought on program manager. And I'm going to just give you a little rundown on this scope of work, and it won't take long, but I think it's good to know that your economic sustainability plan is being updated. Sorry, I have my, I think what I'm going to do is come around here.
And I apologize, before you get started, I also want to welcome Commissioner Nakanishi.
No. Okay, that works a little bit better. So you have before you in your packet the staff report, but I was going to just give you a quick summary. The 2009 Delta Reform Act amendments to the Delta Protection Act included an important element that recognized the Commission's role as a champion for the Delta economy. And so one of this element is that the Commission is required to prepare an economic sustainability plan, and one was of course prepared and submitted as recommendations to the Delta Stewardship Council in 2012. Well, that was like 7 years ago, this month actually, that it was presented to the council. And it's very important that we, it's required and it's also important that we update the economic sustainability plan. So the update has begun already, as you may know, if you've been getting reports on the agriculture chapter. What's before you today is the draft scope for the recreation chapters of the sustainability plan. We're also required to conduct the update about every 5 years. We're not quite on that schedule, but we're doing it mostly in pieces, primarily because we don't have sufficient funding to do the entire plan all at once. So what we're doing is the highest priority sectors of the economy, moving from ag to recreation and so forth. And eventually we'll probably integrate it all together, but it may not look like exactly the same document, which is this document here. So what I thought I would do is just give you a quick rundown on the tasks. The first task is a project management task. It's pretty simple. It's probably maybe 10% of the contract. The second task will be probably separately bid. One of the important things, we continue to make progress on the recreation elements of our mission. So we've done a number of different studies since 2012, as well as Boating and Waterways has done some studies on recreational boating specifically. But what I felt would be important here was that we take all of these studies that have been done and synthesize them so that we have them pretty much all coordinated and packaged as one set of updated data. Then we know if there are any specific gaps that we need to fill. So that's task 2 is a separate task. The third task is fairly small. If it's in the event we find any data gaps still remaining in the way of surveys. And if there are gaps, they're likely to be possibly an emerging recreation trends, underserved communities, and maybe a couple of other areas. But we don't anticipate that's going to be very large. So and then the final task 4 is the actual development of the Recreation and Tourism chapter, which is actually chapter 8, but is also pieces of 10, 11, and 12 because of the way the original ESP was structured. So we'll be updating those relevant sections, and it will come in probably a year after you see the agriculture chapter, maybe less. Probably by or before September of 2020. So that concludes my presentation. And it was just occurring to me that September of 2020, we'll all be thinking about an election, I guess, but
yes, some of us will.
So you might be a little distracted, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? I'll move it, Mr. Chair.
So if you had additional funding in Virginia that were available, would that help accelerate the effort? Does it matter? I mean, obviously there's a body of work that has to be accomplished. And remembering the first plan, as you said, what it took to get that put together. So,
yeah.
Or is, even if funding were available, obviously you'll employ folks to do that, and have all the various iterations that go into the draft form and so forth. So, is that a consideration for the timing? Because even though that'll come quick enough for those that are working on it, September 2020 is still 18 months off. So, and then for submittal, meanwhile, obviously other reviews are going on at the council level, and who knows what happens legislatively. And I just think it's so important. The information beyond what we do here at the commission and/or gets reported to Stewardship Council. That information is important for those who, again, whether it's our legislative delegation, those at the local level who, looking at grant opportunities, looking for opportunities to, I think, bolster whether it's agriculture, recreation, and be supportive of that in a lot of different venues. So I guess I'm just, my question is, relative to financing, because it takes obviously a significant sum of money to do that. And if other money were available, could that be accelerated?
Well, I'll defer to Eric, but I will say that there was, I think maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was an attempt to get the full amount. We submitted a budget change proposal and it wasn't approved. So that's why we're falling back to this section by section update. But certainly it would be nice to be able to update the entire plan from a planner's perspective so that it's more cohesive and so that we can get the recommendations to the council sooner. I should have mentioned, you're correct that it's not just the council, it's other agencies, especially our sister agency, the Conservancy, that bases a lot of their granting off of this economic sustainability plan. So now I'll let Erik respond.
No, I would just only add to that that we believe we have the funding needed to do a good job of updating the recreation chapter. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about the timing for that, so I certainly hear the urgency in your question. And I think as we proceed to speak with potential contractors who can complete this work for us, I think we want to see if we can advance that. We always want to take advantage of timing at the Stewardship Council for when they're updating parts of the Delta plan to make sure that we have the most current information and can make the most compelling proposal to them on what should be incorporated into the Delta plan. And I want to make sure that as they proceed with their review, their 5-year review of the Delta plan, and specifically looking at what they might be doing with the update of Chapter 5, which is where most of those Delta is placed, certainly where most of the agriculture and recreation policies and recommendations are housed, that we're prepared with our information to help inform that. I think we'll be on good timing with the ag section update of the ESP. It might be a little more challenging for us with the recreation update just because we're looking to initiate that effort currently. But we'll see if we can get it completed sooner than the next national election or Supervisor Thompson's next election.
Thank you for the response. I don't know if this microphone's on. Thank you for the response. And I would just say though, if it were, my reason for the question on funding was in other roles that we play too, we certainly would be advocates for that. And I think that if we're good there, it's a matter of obviously getting the work product and all that goes into that. That's reassuring because I think, as I've said and you've restated as well, this has a level of importance for a number of reasons. And I think you make it more cohesive, and it doesn't just play a part and parcel out, and we won't miss windows that are really important for incorporation of information and use in other venues that are important to the communities that we represent, so this commission's efforts. So, thanks for the effort. But I guess you let us know. I mean, obviously, some of you have to be apolitical. Some of us can get engaged in that process, and again, wearing different hats. And for lack of resources in any given year to lag behind, that's something we certainly make a case to some of our delegation and others if necessary.
Yeah, well, certainly when the commission first, in an attempt to comply with the statutory mandate that we update this, or at least review it every 5 years. When we first submitted a budget request for that, it was denied. We then regrouped and thought, well, let's chunk it out and see if smaller pieces. It's been a pretty successful approach for us so far. It certainly means it takes a little bit longer for it to occur, but given that given that the Stewardship Council is just initiating their first 5-year review of the Delta plan, and it seems like that was just adopted yesterday. Things change in the Delta, but they don't change at such an alarming rate that a 5-year schedule is absolutely essential. We'd still like to get it done before we're too many years off of that, and I think we will.
All right, so you do need a motion, right?
Actually, it's up to the commission. If you wish to have a motion to adopt it, we can certainly, take the fact that there were no recommended changes to it as advice from the commission. But if you wish to formally put your stamp on it, that would be fine as well.
Well, Commissioner Thompson's in a motion-making mood tonight, so.
You made 2 tonight. Oh, there's only 4 items, okay.
All right, is there a preference, or?
I'll second that.
All right, so Commissioner Thompson, thank you very much. And then Commissioner Burgess, the second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us to, unless there's any public comment on that item, I didn't ask, but you can see any hands go up. on to an update of the California WaterFix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And by the way, in front of all of the commission members is a letter that we transmitted to the Delta Stewardship Council on the Smith Canal Gate project. And this is just to announce to everyone in the room that we are not discussing this evening. Our chair is currently behind a restriction that he's not to participate in anything related to this matter. This is a letter we submitted to the council. He will see it as a council member. If anyone wishes to discuss this item, we're going to have to ask the chair to excuse himself from the room. But I did want to provide this just because we did provide comment to the council on this item this week.
I just have one question about
And with that comment, I welcome Commissioner Thompson back from the firewall. As everyone on the commission knows, and maybe most people in the audience, he was part of the Delta Stewardship Council when they heard the appeal on the certification of consistency for Cal WaterFix. And that's what this agenda item 10 is about, is to bring the commission up to date on what's happened, because you all might recall when we last met on November 15th in West Sacramento, just that day there had been a hearing before the Delta Stewardship Council, and we were all a little surprised, I think to say the least, when the chair of the council, Chair Fiorini, concluded that hearing by asking DWR to withdraw their certification of consistency. And DWR did that on December 7th. And on that, if not that date, then the day after, but I believe it was on that date, Delta Stewardship Council dismissed the appeals for the certification of consistency. Now, there was some controversy over the appeal dismissal. The appellants were concerned about the resumption of early consultation, and I think the appellants in general wanted the council to take the final action and say this thing is not consistent with the Delta plan. Obviously, the council never did that. It never came to a vote. So where does that bring us today? What's next with the whole process on Cal WaterFix and the Delta Stewardship Council Delta plan process? And really the first question is, what's next with Cal WaterFix? Because we have a new governor. We presumably have new players coming in. We do have a new resources secretary. There might be other new personnel in this new administration. And there's not been a clear signal from this governor where he is on Cal WaterFix. About the only thing that's been stated publicly is that perhaps one tunnel is better than two. But I think everyone's waiting to see what occurs next. In terms of what happens next with the process before the Delta Stewardship Council, if this tunnel project does move forward, a new certification of consistency would be initiated with the Delta Stewardship Council, and therefore a new round of what they call early consultation. That's where the council staff meets with the project proponent. They talk about the project, they talk about what the problems are, where they see it is problematic relative to the Delta plan. And my recommendation to the commission tonight is that, and I've actually drafted a letter that is before all of the commission members, and there are a few extra copies out on the table in the lobby for anyone in the audience that would like to see it. But basically, this letter is consistent with the recommendation I'm making to you, which is that the commission ask to participate in the early consultation process, if indeed there is an early consultation process on some type of revised Delta Tunnel project. The letter basically just says that it's addressed to I'll change the salutation in the letter to say, Dear Executive Officer Pearson. I know her as Jessica, but we'll be a little more formal with this letter. But basically the letter simply says, we'd like to be a part of early consultation on a subsequent round related to Cal WaterFix, especially given how important Delta Plan Policy DPP2, and for those of you who don't know it, and probably no one does know it by number, that's the policy that says that local government land use should be respected with any projects that are proposed in the Delta. And that was a big sticking point for the council staff and presumably for the council members who would have ultimately had to cast a vote when this was moving its way through the hearing process in the fall. So we think we have an important role to play, if that's the will of the commission, to address this larger issue of respecting local land use. Our letter to the council was pretty clear that this project did not respect local land use. I'm not sure what a revised project would look like to be able to make the strong argument from the proponent's perspective that it respects local land use. And I know this is a little sensitive because there's concerns just about how close we get to this process. But given the strong message that was delivered to the council, both through our letter and through the participation of commission members at the hearing, I would like to forward this letter or some version of it to the Stewardship Council and would ask the commission's view of that. I don't think it has to be a formal motion unless you would like it to be, but I do want to make you aware of it. If you feel this is not a good idea, then we will not do it. But even understanding the real question marks around whether this project even continues to live or under what version it continues to live, if it does, and if it does come back before the council, I believe it would be advisable that we try to participate at that early level to ensure that this whatever project is proposed really can be consistent with respecting local land use in the Delta. And for that matter, any other matters involving Delta's place, which is our niche that we guard pretty fiercely in this process.
Yeah, I think that, it's important to continue to take a, cooperative approach to this, recognizing, I think, certainly the history behind this, and, presuming for a moment that the commission, okay with sending this. I think that in paragraph number 4, though, that, that's very polite and it's not out of character, but I think that maybe we gotta do something along the lines, the commission is prepared to provide, and we don't just believe it. I think, for those of us that sit here, that we know we can provide useful feedback. And again, I think to your question about when we do that in the process, but I think this is, offering in a very kind of cooperative way, in a friendly way, but also in a very firm and I think confident way. And maybe so we say the commission is confident or, prepared, or however you want to state that, because I think it's more than believed. I think that we, to your point about the input that we gave during the process previously, and we stand ready, certainly under our charge, but I think also in a way that we bring information to the table. If it's taken in a constructive fashion, I think it would certainly be beneficial to all the parties. So that's all.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good comments, Don. I want to take this opportunity really to thank Commissioner Villegas and Natoli and our Executive Director. The issue that I saw as really a Achilles heel for this consistency was the land use issue. And I think this commission, through our representatives and the County of Sacramento, did a good job of attacking that weakness. So, as the sole, I will say the sole voice of the Delta, it's tough sitting up there. And when you have colleagues like you all that came and spoke, it helped. And the council listened, and I think we had an impact and continue to do that. And we don't believe we do impact the process. We know we do. So anyway, thank you.
So is there general consensus or thought, I mean, this is the first time we've seen a letter like this, I mean,
I think we should go for it,
okay.
yeah.
It does, it sort of begins to force our way to the table. We've had these conversations before, but we characterize it as either you're on the table or at the table, and I think there has been.
Or on the menu.
Or on the menu. And so I think with the new governor, with what the Stewardship Council signaled at the end of last year, and kind of where it landed, I think there is, at least in part, some interest in trying to continue to have this conversation starting at a staff level. So, it's early enough, we can tweak it however we need, but is there general?
Just one quick comment that I would be careful not to infer in the fourth paragraph that Commissioner Natoli referenced, that we can help fix that EIR to make it pass. Regardless of how this vote would go, I think that's critical to the people in the Delta who are strongly against it. Don't want to feel like we're in this business to help, but I absolutely agree. If we'd have been at the table the first time, it would have been a smoother process, maybe resulted in the same thing. So I concur if we can write that accordingly.
Yeah. Just want to respond to that, Eric? I
No,
don't know if that was something that you grappled with.
No, I completely agree with that. It's, I mean, it's certainly, I struggle with that because we want to be productive, but I certainly don't want to be in the position of, telling them how to make this thing acceptable. I mean, they need to propose their project, and, we need to outline how it is or is not consistent with local land use, how it does or does not create significant effects on unique Delta values. So I struggle with that. I mean, I guess I'd still rather be participating and reminding the council, hopefully they don't need a lot of reminding, but reminding the council of what it means to truly protect and enhance the unique Delta values as the law calls for. But it's a tension that I'm always debating it.
Commissioner Bruce?
Well, like it's been said before, we have a new governor. We've had kind of a reset, and I think that everybody's going to be considering how to go forward, and I think this is probably the best time to communicate that we're ready to work with them, and that we want to make sure that those that are kind of coming in that are newer to this conversation, that might be the opportunity to get a little bit more weight on what we're saying.
And I would agree with that. I'm sorry. The point I was making sure that the council agreed with was that there were 8 issues that we helped stop for one reason. It wasn't consistent with the Delta plan. Excuse me. I don't want to go on record as saying those are the only 8 things that I think is wrong with the EIR. Maybe that's not for this council to take up now, but you know what I'm saying, Eric, and that was my point.
And I was just gonna say, Oscar, to Don's point, we're here, we have a role to play, Delta Protection Commission, the name says a lot, and we wanna be part of this, I'm not sure, this process, if you will. And we have a lot to contribute, and getting away from, we wanna help, that's not our role to help them. Our role is to make sure that the issues that are in our charge are addressed appropriately. So I don't know if that helps, but that's the essence of what I think the letter should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really speaks to the unique role we play with the council in advising them on how best to protect and enhance the unique Delta values. And that usually takes place in the context of both the creation and adoption of the Delta plan and then any subsequent changes to the Delta plan. But this is a significant enough project that has tremendous effects on everything that, all of those unique delta values. And so, given the special role that we play with the council process, I do feel strongly that it's better for us to be involved in an early stage of that effort as opposed to coming in when it's a baked cake and then they're seeking consistency under the Delta plan.
Is there any need for the letter to go out today?
No, I have no indication that this has, that there is an effort charging ahead to resume early consultations. Presumably that will occur again at some point. I don't have any insight into the DWR thinking on this. I presume that they're trying to figure out what the next step is at this point.
Could we allow the executive director and our chair to work together and authorize under Oscar's signature to send the letter?
I think at this point, unless there's a feeling differently, a staff-to-staff level letter to introduce the subject matter conversation is probably okay. I'm not comfortable working with Eric on the content of the letter if there are tweaks that we need to make, unless there's something that's kind of a non-starter in front of us. But Eric had suggested, and I would concur, that at this juncture, in the second week into January, a staff-to-staff letter probably sort of sent to the chair.
Yeah, I was a little remiss in not delving further into that point. Because this early consultation process is really at the staff level, and of course, our chair is a member of the council, so anyway, my thinking was it probably works better on a staff level. It'll get to our chair soon enough in his role as a council member. But it probably would be a little awkward for him to be playing that role in the early consultation process. It's well below his pay grade, so.
Awkward is being very nice.
Or is it above your pay grade? I forget what the saying is.
It's all awkward no matter how you use it.
That's true.
Yeah, I think at staff level at this juncture would probably. Okay. So there's
Yeah,
some
and I certainly heard the comment of Commissioner Natoli as well, and that's a very useful change to the letter. I appreciate that.
Just want to make sure we got the letter in early.
Okay, so that'll be the direction of the staff. Yeah, Mark, does anybody else want to comment on what we just discussed?
I think I might be able to provide a little insight on what DWR is thinking. I was at a design construction finance authority meeting this morning, and the chief counsel for DWR gave a verbal report on the certification. I was very disappointed to hear him characterize that the reason DWR did not get certification was because of just some misunderstandings. That was the word he used. And then he went on to say that because of the appeal period and rules and the sequestration, I think that was his word, both the staff and the members, the DWR wasn't able to meet kind of behind the scenes and just sort of explain their way along. Commissioner Thompson was there, I was there for a little bit of it. That's absolutely not what was happening. There wasn't some misunderstandings and we just didn't quite connect the dots. It was much more serious than that. So he went on to explain that they're moving immediately to have staff-to-staff discussions between DWR and the Stewardship Council. And then when that was done, what I heard him say, that sequentially then he would move to the staff discussions with DPC. They recognized DPC was very much in the loop, and that he was targeting or estimating that the summer of this year would be the time when the certification would come forward again. So that puts it on a track. It's not immediate like next month, but I have some other notes here that are kind of along the same way. I was just that he kept coming back to the misunderstandings. There were just some points we just didn't quite, a little bit more education, the Stewardship Council would have gotten there, was the clear message that he was I would just, if, you know, I'm kind of write for a living, so, looking at paragraph 4, I appreciate Commissioner Natoli and Commissioner Slater making, and Mr. Thompson making comments. The word improved, Cal WaterFix, that word improved is maybe not the best word to use. You could say something more innocuous, like address it or interact with, something along those lines. And then I would also ask, and instead of being about mitigating delta values, returning to the statutory language which mandates, it absolutely mandates, requires that the co-equal goals must operate in a way that enhances and protects those values and lists them out. So that would be my request, that those changes be included as well. Thank you very much.
All right, Mark. Thank you, Mark. All right, not seeing anybody else coming forward. Are there any other thoughts or comments on our item? So Eric, you'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of that in its final form. And then-
Yes. Yeah, and we'll continue to keep the commission updated as we continue down this path.
Okay. All right, that takes care of that item, unless there's anything else. Item 11 is commissioner comments or announcements. Any comments, announcements? Seeing none, we are looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion and second by.
I'm gun shy, I'm not saying no.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.